In this demo, we'll begin the process of creating a responsive design site. It's going to be a very simple site right now with just 2 pages, and I've got the beginnings of it here. I'll demonstrate this and then we'll begin this from scratch. But it's basically 2 pages, as you can see here, a home page and an About Us page. And everything so far in this example is all done in the master page. We'll have a phase 2 where we'll start to populate the pages, but for now these are all the master elements. So let me just pop open that master, double click it here, and we basically got header and footer elements. Alright, I've got a menu here, I've also got a menu in the header, I've got a logo, we've got a repeating graphic background that I'll talk about shortly that repeats in the browser fill, and it was created in such a way that it would align with the design of the logo here. And then in the footer, we simply got a widget of following Adobe on Twitter and a little copyright line of text. All right, so let's just push this now. You can see also a number of breakpoints above here. And we'll talk about those shortly. Let's just see the result right now. I'll go File, Preview Site in Browser. And there we have our site. So this is at kind of maximum width, if you will. And the big thing to observe here is I do have 4 breakpoints. And what you should take note is things that change as I narrow the width of the browser. Now, a lot of these things are dependent on the pinning and if the elements are set to responsive design or not. So I'll tell you right now that this logo is pinned to the left. This menu is pinned to the left. This copyright element is pinned to the center, this widget is pinned to the right, and this menu is pinned to the right. So as we shrink to the left, these things will slowly tighten up. And I did set the page to 1200 at its largest. And you can see here, once that menu and that widget start to move closer to the other elements, I've hit that 1200 mark. And now they'll squeeze upon themselves. And at a certain point, watch for the copyright element in the bottom. It's actually going to move. And that would be the second breakpoint right there. If I go backwards, okay, so that copyright element in the bottom, based on the breakpoint, I can actually change the layout, size and properties of the font, and other properties. So that's quite convenient. So now I'm going to kind of go till I hit the next breakpoint, and you can see at the top that my menu is about to hit the logo. So boom, I have a substitute mini logo, if you will, and as soon as I hit that spot, the big logo disappears, the small logo is in place, and it allows me to shrink it even further. Now if I go up and down here, you can see that my footer sticks to the bottom of the page. Okay, now I'm at the smallest breakpoint basically here. I know that because I put in a mobile menu right here, and I could probably style that a bit better. You can see here that it's functioning, and if I come out a bit wider, kind of back to the regular menu, which is more like what you'd see on a website or on a tablet. Okay, so we just had a few things shifting, graphics hiding, other graphics showing based on breakpoints. So let's go in now and see how this is built. Now, before we build our own, let's go through this finished version here, or at least the master page is finished at this point. I want to talk about the breakpoints at the top of the page here that you can see in different colors. Basically, you can click on them to highlight them once they're created, but I will show you how to create them once we build a new one. But for now, just understand that they are 4 distinguished widths, and based on those widths, we can affect layouts, things that are on the page, hide things that might be on the page in different breakpoints, and have certain things scale accordingly based on our fluid layout. So let's go out to the 1200. That means this is the layout when the browser is at least 1200 pixels wide or wider. Now a subtle thing here is these 2 arrows. That means that things will not expand with the arrows pointing in. You can click this and have it pointing out, and that would be things that are set to responsive width and height. They would continue to expand beyond that point. But I'm going to turn it back to its default pointing inwards, which means that once we reach the 1200 point mark, things will basically lock into size. They will continue to recenter on the page as the page browser, or as the browser widens even further, but other than that, things will be stable and locked relative to each other. Okay. So let's go around the block here. I'll just highlight the logo up at the top here, and you'll notice that they're all pinned to the page, which is these three dots versus the browser. This is pinned to the left. I've got a menu down here in the footer that is pinned to the left as well. This copyright element is pinned to the center, and this menu and this widget are both pinned to the right. Okay, now I'm just going to make a slight correction here. I see in my header, I'm just going to define it to be all of those graphics right there. Just a fine tuning. It probably even wouldn't affect anything, but I'm just being fussy here. All right, so let's go into the next breakpoint, which means that when the browser is at 940 or lower, between 940 and 724 to be specific, it will look like this. And really the only thing that I changed here was that I moved this down and I made the text smaller. Now you can see over here in our text elements we have format text on current breakpoint, and the one with the 4 T's means format text across all breakpoints. So if you want it to be different between breakpoints, use the large T. Alright, so if I go back here and see here the text, if I highlight it, the text is set at 14, and there's the color and the font. Alright, if I go to the next breakpoint, highlight that text, same font and color, but the text is set to 12. Alright, so let's go down to the next breakpoint, which starts at 724. And they are all uniquely color-coded. And the main thing here is, I don't know if it's sort of like, can you tell the difference? Yes, this large wide logo is not there anymore. It's been replaced with a smaller iconic logo. And then we go down a little bit further to the last breakpoint, which is at 550, assuming we're going to get into mobile phone territory here. I've actually replaced the menu with a menu that uses the widgets. It uses a menu and it uses an accordion. Alright, so we've learned how to do that in another lesson, and we'll recreate an accordion menu here for this smallest breakpoint. Alright, so that's basically how the thing got constructed. So let's start a brand new file. Okay, so we'll go File, New Site. And the only thing we really need to be concerned with for this demo is that we are working with fluid width, and we will reset the maximum page width to 1200 pixels. And what that'll do is that'll set our first breakpoint at 1200. So let's click OK. And I should just save my site. It's not actually saved yet, so as a standard, we should save things immediately to create a spot on it on our hard drive. So I'm just going to go Save Site. And I do have a folder that I've been using for these demos. So I'll just call this responsive _01. Okay, and click Save. And now the site and the file rather exists. So just to get the ball rolling here, I'm going to add a page right away. I'll just go up here. There we go. I'll click Add Page, and I'll name it About Us. Alright, hit my Enter key. So now I've got two pages. They're all blank, but when I generate a menu, at least it will show both of those pages. Now everything we will do here will take place in the master. Let's just double click the master here. And we'll basically be working on the header and the footer. So we'll start with the footer. And we'll talk about breakpoints shortly, but maybe just make sure that you can see them. You can go to View, Show Breakpoints. Also want you to make sure that your rulers are visible. So these are on right now. And also frame edges. So they should by default be on. All right, so frame edges, breakpoints, and rulers should be on. All right. Now let's just open up this footer a little bigger. So I'm just going to go down to the bottom of the page icon here and drag that and open that up a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in a rectangular block and stretch it to fit the browser width. So we'll start with our rectangle tool and I'll snap it to the top of the footer here and to the bottom of the page. I'll give it a dark gray. I guess I'll pick this one for now. And if I don't like it, I guess I can always change that. I want it to be more neutral. There we go. And I'll go to the resize, stretch to browser width. There we go. So every time I make one of these changes, I will save. Save site. Okay, so there's basically three elements we want to put on the footer. One is a menu, a little menu. A little copyright text box in the middle, and just for fun, a widget on the right hand side that I guess can be clickable for Twitter. So let's start, I guess, with maybe the menu. Move up to our widget library. And I will just drag out horizontal menu and drag it over to the left here. And I don't really want to play with the options right now. We'll close that window. But I will change some of the styles. And let's see here. I'm going to make the backgrounds transparent. I'm also going to squeeze this tighter together. Okay. So I'll just double click that right now to get into the background fill and set that to none. Now I need to do that on all the states. So I'll go in here. I'll go over to active. Change that to none and come back in here, and it really doesn't matter which order you go in, just make sure they're all off, and finally roll over, turn that off. Okay, now I'm going to go into the text at this time and change the font and size. I'll double click on the text until I get to it. I'm simply going to change that to Arial, and we'll make it a little bigger, 16. Alright, so it's 16 in white. Now, maybe for the mouse over, I'll make the text go slightly transparent. So let's go to the arrow tool here, and I'll click away and click on the text box, or rather the menu. And it's basically clicking your way down here. And let's just go to active. I'm just going to change the active state actually. Active. And if we make that, say 50%, when we're on that page, it should look a little more gray. So let's just check that again. There we go. Okay. And if I want to test that, I'll just go to preview here. And you see now that I'm on that page, that one is a little darker looking. It's just because it's more transparent. It's translucent, in fact. Okay, so that works fine. All right, so we've got our little menu. Let's pin it now to the page. We'll highlight that. And I'll actually just drag that and snap it to the edge here. And then using the page pin, I'll pin it to the left. Okay, the next thing I'm going to add is the little widget for the social media, which would be the Twitter follow. Alright, so we'll grab that and drag that out here. And I'll just leave it at its default follow Adobe Muse. But you can put in any Twitter account you want in the settings here. And I'm just going to use my smart guides to align that to the center, and I'll put it to the far right. and I'll pin it to the right side of the page, just like that. And save. So if I was to go preview in browser, which I'll do here quickly, preview page in browser, the two items should be pinned to the either side of the page, so they should just look like they're approaching each other. And if I get wider than the 1200, they'll kind of just lock to the center at a certain point, as you can see there. Okay, so they're kind of centered. When I get lower than 1200, they will start to get closer together. And I'm looking at that menu and I'm thinking it's probably set to responsive right now. If those two menu items get closer together, it is. And I can see that that's what's happening. Now that's not such a bad thing. You can see there. If I wanted to maintain that distance, I would have to turn the responsive to none on that. And I think for the sake of this exercise, I'll do that, even though it seems to be okay, the way it's working here. I'm going to go back, highlight that. Under resize, I'll just check that to none. And let me quickly show you the difference here again. Preview page in browser. Now that distance for the menu is constant. It's not adjusting itself according to the fluid width of the page. Alright. For me, it's just a little more stable. As a designer, I do like the fact that they are seen as a group, if you will. Okay, so there we have our pinning, something to the left and something to the right. Now let's put a text element in the middle here. So I'll just go to my text tool. Now this is very important. We have two options when it comes to breakpoints for applying text. Format text on current breakpoint, or this one with the 4 T's. Format text across breakpoints, which means it would be common across all the breakpoints. I'm going to use the front one, the large T, so that it only applies to this breakpoint. So let me just go in here and drag a text box out. And I'll center it here. I'll leave it at Arial 14, but I'm going to change that to, say, let me try this beige and see. And I'll start typing here. Copyright 2017, my name, so you should put your name, I guess. And I'll just put a hyphen here, responsive design exercise, so that I have a bit of copy here to really demonstrate when this thing starts to crowd that we can actually make some changes. Alright, so let me just go here and maybe just with my smart guides, that should be center. And that should be centered with the other elements. Alright, if I wanted to actually check, I could highlight it, of course, go to my align to content area, which you couldn't see there because it was cut off. Align horizontal centers, and in fact it is aligned to center. Let me just save that. Okay, and let's pin that. I should have pinned it first, I guess, but I'll highlight it and pin it to the center of page. Nothing is being pinned to the browser. Again, if you pin it to the browser, it's basically going to be locked in place relative to the browser. So let's do a quick preview here. Alright, so there's my menu, there's my copyright, there's my widget. If I start to pull these together, you can see here, once it gets past the 1200, they all just uniformly are centered. But when I start to encroach to 1200, this starts to happen, and then eventually I get overlap, and it's where that overlap starts to take place. We'll call it, that's where the page breaks, therefore the name breakpoint. I probably want to make a change in my layout. In fact, of course I would. So let's go back here, and we're going to create our first breakpoint. Now the way we establish the new breakpoint, there's a couple of ways actually. There's the slider here, the gripper, or I can right click up here and go add breakpoint and define a pixel width. So, but we're going to use the gripper here to start, because that way I can actually see when the page starts to break. Okay, so let me just grab that, and looking at my text in the middle here, I'm going to say right about here is where I think it should start to change. So once I let go of the gripper, you see a little plus sign up here, create new breakpoint. There we go. There's my second breakpoint, and it's at 914 pixels. So between 914 and 1200, the design will look like that. But from 914 down, whatever I do here is how it will change. So I'm actually going to pull this down. I'll hold my shift key down, so I'll bring it basically like a line below. And let me see here. I might have to actually duplicate it and substitute it out, but I'm going to see if I can change the font size here. I'm going to highlight it here. I have to make sure that my format text is on current breakpoint, and we'll just bring that down to 12. And I'll know right away. I can just click over to the other breakpoint, and if the other one went down as well, then I'll have to do a little trick where I duplicate it and hide it. In fact, it did work, which is excellent. So again, at the 1200 pixel breakpoint, the position of this text box is in between these two elements. And if I highlight the text here, you can see that the font is set to 14. I could conceivably change other properties, but we're just going to change the size. Alright, so if I go back to my selection tool and click inside of the next breakpoint, I can see what I've changed. I've changed not only the font size, but the location of the text box. Let's save that right now. And we'll go out, preview in browser, and see that manifest itself. So here we go. Actually, you know, when it's set to the breakpoint, that's where the browser will appear, I believe. So I'm going to just click on this widest point and go preview page in browser. Okay, so again, there's my 1200. Watch the text in the middle as it jumps when things get too tight. Here it comes. There it goes. Now you're seeing a little flash because it's just in preview mode. You wouldn't see that white flash if you actually output this and uploaded it. But there we go. So now we can get a lot closer, and it looks like my text is set to responsive. I can see that this is bumping here, but we can deal with that when we get to that. But that text is also set to responsive. If I didn't want the text to flow and stay on the one line, I would turn the responsive to none. And in fact, as a designer, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to come back here, highlight the text. Right now, it's set to responsive here as well. Now my text box is so wide that before I get to the other breakpoint, I don't really see a reaction to that, so I might as well set that to none as well. But the big one here is to go to the next breakpoint, click it, highlight the text box, and set the resize to none. Alright, so that will guarantee that that won't reflow. If I want it to flow, of course, I would leave it on responsive. I'm just going to save that one more time. And just go back here again and show you. And we'll preview that in the browser very quickly. Preview page in browser. Now when I start to shrink this, boom, it goes lower, but this time it does not reflow. You can see how that retains its single line feature. Alright, so things to be aware of. So it's not just a matter of creating breakpoints, but how do we make things relate to the breakpoints? Via pinning and resizing. Okay, so there we are. There is our footer. And I would say our footer is done up until this breakpoint. Maybe we can find where this gets too tight and create another breakpoint. Alright, so let's do that now. So we'll grab the gripper and we'll tighten that up until these things start to intersect, and I'll say about there. So we'll add another breakpoint right there. Happens to be 551. Now if I wanted to round that out, I could go in here and right click, breakpoint properties, and just make the fine tuning adjustments here in the properties panel. Alright, so I've set it to 550. I will save my file and continue. Now at this point, maybe I should just set this to responsive. So resize, responsive width. I also can drag this over as well. So let's just save that and see if that helps. Okay. And preview in browser. Alright, so we'll go wide and then come in narrow. So there's my middle popping down, and then when I get close here, snap. It is working, and it did deal with it. Although as a designer, I'm not sure if I like how it adjusts there. But it does take care of the collision. Alright, so I'm just going to go again, putting my designer hat on. I'm going to turn off the responsive. I'm going to set that to none. I'm simply going to narrow it manually. Save it. And give that a quick test in the browser. Preview page in browser. Okay, so I've got 3 breaking points happening right now. Boom. And boom. And you know what? That's totally addressing it there. Alright, so nothing is colliding. And things are readjusting. And you can come in and tweak this to make it, ideal to your design sensibilities, but technically speaking, this is completely working now and addressing any potential collisions. Alright, so that is our footer. Just come back out to Muse now.